Hi there, this is Patty Minch again with the Can You Filter Your Water activity. I started off by setting out all my materials, making sure I had everything, and taking note of the characteristics of each of the materials to see if I could figure out how each one would help filter the water that I had. I had to look up what alum did, and I found that really interesting and beneficial. So looking at some of the videos of students who were doing this activity, I saw that they had some slightly dirty water with a few sticks floating in it maybe. So I tried to see how dirty I can make some water. So I got a little bit of mulch and some mud and mixed it all up to see how well the filter would work with some really dirty, muddy water. So on the right you can see that I set up my filtration system starting at the top. I have the gauze, and then moving down I have the gravel, the charcoal, the sand, and then in the bottom cup I put a little bit of the alum in, so that whatever water was trickling down into that would start to mix with the alum so that the particles could attach to that and hopefully sink to the bottom. So looking at the first layer, some teaching opportunities or learning opportunities came to mind. As I started to separate the layers, I was taking note of the things that got stuck in that layer, and how the cheesecloth was helpful in filtering out some of the bigger pieces, and how the cheesecloth represented the roots and vegetation in the first layer of the Earth's surface. And so from there I made a connection to the importance of having adequate vegetation. As I started to go down, I got a little bit nervous because the cheesecloth and the gravel still left some pretty muddy water in the charcoal. So I was curious what the charcoal was taking out. And from this, I started thinking of questions that students might have. I think looking at what the cheesecloth and the gravel took out, those are testable questions. As you start to get into more of the microscopic elements of what charcoal is doing to the water and what alum is doing to the water, those are more research-based questions, but nevertheless, it kind of lends itself to more questions and wanting to find more evidence of what's occurring there. This was my end product, and I'll admit I wasn't too happy with it. I was a little bit disappointed, but I remembered then that in order to activate the alum, it needs to be stirred in with the water pretty well. Remembering this, I decided to stir up the water a little bit and see if that would help anything, and this is what I ended up with. So after stirring, there is my actual finished product. And it led me to think that maybe I shouldn't have expected that the water be perfectly clear at the bottom of the filter, having only gone through these natural filtration systems. Got me thinking that maybe if I were to pull water directly out of an aquifer, it's probably not going to be crystal clear, and that's why we need to further filter water to make it safe for drinking. So looking at this activity through the lens of a teacher, and putting it kind of on the spectrum of teacher-guided versus learner self-directed, I'm going to go down through the essential features here, 1 through 5, and kind of give my perspective of where this task ends up in that spectrum, and a little bit of reasoning as to why I put it there. So the first one, I said that learners, this sharpens or clarify the question. Initially, the question was posed, can you filter the water? And that would be pretty teacher-guided. There's not too much self-directed inquiry happening there. With regard to how learners are giving priority to evidence and give explanations based on that, I said this is pretty high in the learner self-directed. It's up to students to really determine if this water is clean or not and what the evidence is of that. So going back, looking at the different layers, trying to figure out what got taken out, comparing the before and after. That wasn't given to me. I needed to find it and figure out what evidence was discovered through my experiment. For the next essential feature, learners formulating explanations. From the evidence, I said that this one was pretty high up on the learner self-directed side of the scale, where the student would need to formulate their own explanation. None of the evidence was provided to the learner. They needed to get it themselves and then make sense of that evidence. Next, I would say that the learner was given possible connections. It was clear that we were making connection between how the earth filters water through infiltration, and how our filters should do the same thing, and making connections between the two. I think it would depend on how the teacher presented this in the classroom to be higher on the learner self-directed side of things. And then lastly, I think that it was pretty clear that it was up to the learner to communicate and justify explanations for the phenomena that they saw. So overall, I would say that this activity is pretty high on the learner self-directed side. Another way that we could identify the level of inquiry of this activity or this task is to use the rubric which is provided in the Structuring the Level of Inquiry in the Classroom article written by Fay and Bretz. I think this is a effective and quick way to identify how inquiry-based an activity is before implementing it in the classroom. So as we look down through this rubric, it's broken into 3 parts: the problem, the question, procedure and method, and then the solution. So I would say as far as the problem and the question go, this is somewhere around here. Again, it depends on how this is presented to students. It could certainly be provided to students, or it could be constructed by students, but it depends on how that class is set up or how that lesson is set up. As far as the procedure and method, this is definitely constructed by students. Even though some of the materials were provided, the activity in and of itself was completely constructed by the student. And then lastly, the solution was definitely constructed by the student. So overall, using this rubric, also I would say that this is pretty high, either a 2 or 3 in the level of inquiry.